Hey, hi, hello, and welcome back to Storytime with Yaz. Thank you so much for tuning in. It means the world to me that you want to engage with my content, and I'm so excited to bring you today's video where we're going to be talking about the sunrise on the reaping cover. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yaz and I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I am a Christian and I have begun to delve into this world of media, arts and entertainment, and I'm gonna teach you guys how to pull apart the Christian symbolism in different things in media. And I thought, what better place to start than the Hunger Games, because for those of you who don't know, last year when the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out, which is the prequel to the trilogy, when it came out in movie form, I went and watched it at the cinema, and it reignited this desire in me to engage in this world again. When I was walking early on in my faith, I read these books. I remember very vividly the first movie coming out and literally going and watching this thing and be like, oh my gosh, Clove is going to kill everyone, and bursting into tears because I remembered her from Orphan. Those of you who have watched Orphan will know exactly what I'm talking about, but I was terrified for everyone, including Katniss, in the moment when I saw Clove, and I was like, everyone's gonna die, that's it. Having no idea, having not read the books, having no idea what was going to happen. And so after that, I did read all 3 books in about 5 days when I was house sitting at my cousin's house. And then I just I watched the movies when they came out, but I didn't really jump back in. And so when the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out, I was like, what do you mean there's a new Hunger Games book/movie? I want to engage. And so I watched the movie and then read the book, and I was like, hold your horses, there is so much in this and I want to talk about it. So here I am finally talking about it. So I thought, why not bring it into the YouTube space, because it's going to be fun, and I feel like I have a very different perspective than all the other creators that I have seen talk about it. So we are going to begin my Christian Symbolism in Media series on sunrise on the reaping and the biblical symbolism that I'm seeing in the cover that no one's talking about, because everyone's talking about it from the place of Greek mythology. So let's hop straight into it. There are 3 things that I want to talk to you guys about today. The first symbol that I see on the cover is the sunrise/crown of thorns. The second symbol I see is the songbird and the snake. And then the third thing I see is the lyre. So we're going to talk about them. We're also going to talk about some of the quotes and kind of plot points that we've heard, the things that we know about the synopsis, the things that we know that Suzanne Collins and David Leviathan have said about what's to come in the book and in the movie, and we're just going to break it down a little bit. And then I'm going to do my next video on, as a Christian, what are some of the headcanons I see because of what I've seen in the cover of the book. So let's get straight into it. The first thing that we're going to talk about today is the sunrise/crown of thorns. I thought I wanted to talk about this first because on the spine of the book we see the word sunrise on the reaping, the title of the book, and then we see 2 suns but split in the middle, and I think this is going to allude to the fact that everything, including everything we're going to talk about today, has a double meaning. And so we're going to start there with the sun/crown of thorns. So when we think about the sun, I also think about Jesus, the Son, S-O-N, even though we're looking at the sun, S-U-N. And the symbol of the sun is twofold in this. The first symbol of the sun being S-U-N. So this sun, I think, is going to be symbolic of Haymitch's girlfriend. Now, I have nothing to prove this theory other than it says the symbol of the sunrise is going to become very important to Haymitch over the course of this book. So what I think is going to happen is that Haymitch's girlfriend is going to have some sort of sunrise name, Dawn or Aurora or something like that, and we're going to see that every day as the sun rises, that it's going to bring him hope. Is there a scripture about that? I'm going to Google that. If I find it, the scripture is going to be on the screen. If not, that was a freebie from me. It says his mercies are new every morning. That's what I was thinking. Yes. That his mercies are new every morning. And I think every day when Hamish wakes up and he sees this sunrise, he's gonna think of his girlfriend, think about every day is new, every day is fresh. Maybe that's even some kind of catchphrase she's gonna leave Hamish with, something along these lines. And it's gonna remind him every day I wake up, I see this sunrise, it reminds me of my girlfriend because her name is linked to it, and we're also then gonna see what that means to him and how he's gonna portray that to the capital, because maybe he wants to portray this like lost love story in the districts. Like, who knows? We actually don't know Hamish's full angle. If what we think we know, we don't actually know. So I think this is going to be really interesting to start off our wordplay with. The second meaning of sun actually ties to the crown of thorns, and that is the story of Jesus when he is wearing this crown of thorns. So initially when I saw this cover art, the very first thing I saw was this crown of thorns, and I was like, whoa, why is there a crown of thorns like on the cover of this book? And this is the scripture that came to mind. It's found in John 19, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 12, and then we're just going to break down each portion. So it says, "So then Pilate took Jesus and had him scourged, whipped and flogged. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and put a purple robe around him." What color is the book, you guys? It's purple. This is why. And they kept coming up to him, saying mockingly, "Hail, King of the Jews! Good health, peace, long life to you, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. Then Pilate came out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him to you so that you may know that I have found no guilt in him, no crime and no cause for accusation." So Jesus came out wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe, and Pilate said to them, "Look, the man." When the chief priests and officers saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him, no crime and no cause for accusation." The Jews answered him, "We have a law regarding blasphemy, and according to the law he should die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." So when Pilate heard this said, he was even more alarmed and afraid. He went into the praetorium again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus did not answer him. So Pilate said to him, "So do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you, and I have authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no authority over me at all if it had not been given to you from above. For this reason, the sin and guilt of the one who handed me over to you is greater than your own." As a result of this, Pilate kept making efforts to release him, but the Jews kept screaming, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who makes himself out to be king opposes Caesar and rebels against the emperor." Okay, let's break it down verse by verse. I think in verse 1, it talks about Jesus being whipped. And we know from Catching Fire and Gail's expedition to the whipping post that this is something that they did previously around the time of Hamish's games to scare people and to hurt them and to kill them. And so we know that Hamish has definitely had an encounter around this with Katniss's mum, because he knows, and he says to Katniss, "Everyone who was flogged back then, we brought to your mother. Your mother is going to be able to heal Gale." And so it's very, very clear to us that Hamish has had multiple, if not very close people in his life be near death or die because of this being whipped, and the best person, the only person who could heal them was Katniss's mum. So we know this is already something that has been discussed in the trilogy that will be happening, because there's no propaganda around that at all. That is like one of the only things we know for sure. The second verse says, "They twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and put a purple robe around him. And they kept coming to him, mocking him." and they slapped him in the face. And so I think that this is probably all going to happen around the crowning ceremony when Haymitch is victor, after they've done the like interview and then they crown him. So similar to how Snow said to Katniss, "What a lovely pin." We're going to see this interaction between the ruler, whoever is the president at this time, because I'm going to assume at some point in the course of this that Snow goes from being head game maker to president of Pan Am. And I wonder if it's going to be because of how Haymitch's victory is treated by the president, and he's going to go, "We can't have this unalive." And so we're gonna see this really interesting push and pull from the Capitol between the head game maker Snow and the president at the time, like battling it out and seeing who has more power to influence the society. And so that's gonna be fascinating. We also see the crown of thorns, which will probably be on Haymitch's head, and we also see the purple, which is in the cover as well. Obviously, this is really interesting to me because I haven't seen anyone recognize that this is a biblical reference to purple, which is to do with royalty. The way that we've been described this in the past is that game makers have had purple, and I guess like game makers are technically capital royalty, but now that Haymitch has won the games and outsmarted the game makers, they're probably going to intentionally dress him in purple in order to mock him and be like, "You outsmarted the capital, but like you won't get away with it because now we're going to make you look like them." And so I think this is going to be really, really interesting. I wonder if they'll even put like a game maker kind of like get up on him or something like that. That's going to be very symbolic of the power and the pull that Haymitch has like moving forward. And also, again, the real or not real that the districts are going to be like confused by, because they're like, wait, but he just outsmarted the capital, so are they now claiming him as their own? Like, I thought he was with us. Is he actually with them? And everything that he's going to have, like all the lines that he's going to have fed to him per se in these times are probably going to smack of the opposite of what he actually thinks. So it's going to be that what's real and what's not real, what's he saying to please the capital versus what he's saying to like win over the district. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they play that. And then I think the president, I don't know if the president's going to be Snow or if the game maker's going to give him the crown, but like I wonder if we're going to see Haymitch backchat and get slapped. When they bring him out into the interviews in verse 4, it talks about, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you and I find no guilt in him." I mean, the crown of thorns leads to Jesus' death and then resurrection, right? So I wonder if all of this is just pointing to Haymitch is going to die. And then when they bring him back to life, they're going to be like, "Oh no, like he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't outsmart us. Like he won." And they're going to keep it very on the down low how they really feel. And they're going to play it up to the capital audience like, "Oh, he was meant to be able to get through. Like it's going to be fine, guys." So they're going to have it like propaganda both ways. So Haymitch is probably going to hear this from his prep teams, but also then he's going to have like the voice of like, you know, other people from his district, like when he goes back, and he's going to be so confused because everything's just twisted, and he's going to have to start like grappling with it himself, which is then going to lead him back to District 12. When he's in District 12, I think the people are going to be really upset, because I wonder if whippings and different things have already started. I wonder if they've already started finding like the underground, the rebels in 12 that helped him to participate in this way and have started already killing people. Or like as soon as he gets back, execution, like day after day after day. So like we know that the Capitol camera crews stick around for a little bit for like the food parcels and stuff, but after about a week they're gone. And so it says within 2 weeks Haymitch's mother and brother and girlfriend had all been killed. So I'm guessing that he's going to be basically given a warning from Snow at the end of this, similar to Katniss's warning. But Snow's going to be like, expect people you love to die. It's the things we love the most that destroy us. Like, and then he's going to go on to say like different things that would allude to he's not going to know the time or the place which people are going to die. And so I think this is going to be really interesting. And then biblically, we don't know the time or the place that Jesus is going to come back. So we have to be prepared at all times, and Hamish is going to feel really unprepared because he doesn't know who's on the chopping block. And so he's going to have friends dying, parents dying, siblings dying, girlfriend dying, probably friends' parents dying, you know, other rebels that he knew about dying, and he's going to be like, I don't know which way to turn next, who to tell, who to protect, can I even protect anyone? And he's going to just be like frantic. And so I think this is going to be really, really hard for him to grapple with, but I think it's going to lead him to kind of seclude himself. He's going to seclude himself, shut his door, and be like, I'm not talking to anyone. Like, I don't have a defense. Like, I don't know what's going on, and I need to figure it out first before I can help anyone else. Pre-victory tour, kind of like we see Snow come again to Katniss before the victory tour. I wonder if we're gonna see someone like a capital person of some kind, like an escort or something like that, come back in and basically be like, don't you know that we have the power to release you or crucify you? Like, we have the power for you to live or to die. So you better do this right. And I wonder if that's going to be similar to a line that this like escort or whoever is going to say to him. This is where I think it gets a bit spicy. In verse 11 it says, Jesus answered that you would have no authority over me if it had not been given to you from above. So I wonder if that's a line that he's literally going to use back to this escort or whoever it is that's been sent to keep an eye on him. And for this reason, like, the sin and guilt of the one who handed me over to you is greater, which is really like the capital handed him over to the districts. And so I think this is going to be really, really interesting to see how they play into the propaganda here. And the very, very last sentence says, anyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar and rebels against the emperor. And so I think they're going to use this as a theme to be like, oh my gosh, like, Hamish is the king of the Hunger Games, he won against the most tributes, and la 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 la. And because he outsmarted the capital, we have the power to overthrow the emperor now. And so it's going to be this like push and pull between like the rebellion and the people who just want to keep living their lives and like allowing the Hunger Games to happen and not realizing that they're feeding into what the capital wants. I do think we're going to see a lot of really intense things, but yeah, at the very top of them, I think we're going to see how and why District 12 doesn't love Hamish as a victor and why he turns to alcohol. So that is a theory 1 from the cover art. The number 2 symbol that we're going to look at from the cover art is the songbird and the snake. Now I think this has a double meaning to the scripture that talks about being as wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. But first let's talk about the idea of a songbird and a snake. The songbird comes from obviously what we know is a symbol of District 12, which represents the covey. And the covey is this band of musicians who had once been rebels traveling the districts, encouraging the uprisings. It's kind of parallel to like the Levites in scripture and how they would like sing before the assembly. They'd often go out first to battle. So I think this is what the symbol of the covey is, and it's going to be really fascinating to see how they use it in the context of this book. My current working theory is that Hamish is actually covey. I'm going to get into that in my third theory from the cover and also in my headcanons video, which is going to come next. But the first thing that I think of when I think of the songbird is that they're a symbol of hope. So song is often referenced in scripture as a symbol of hope, and the Psalms are where we find the song. So when I get into my next symbol on the cover, we're going to talk a little bit more about song, and I'm going to also talk about it in my headcanons and theories in my next video. But there's a lot here that I think we can reference in relation to this. I was thinking about the scripture that this links to with the doves, and I asked the Lord, I was like, hey, like, I wonder if there are any doves that are songbirds. And the Lord's like, yes, Google it. And so I was like, okay, so I like Googled it, and this is what I found, you guys, because this is really, really cool. It says that there is one type of dove that is a songbird, and it is the mourning dove, mourning. Also low-key double meaning morning and like sunrise and morning. And it says the mourning dove is a pigeon-like bird that is a well-known backyard songbird. It is the only North American bird that is classified as both a songbird and a game bird. And I went, wait a second, if that doesn't sound like the covey, I don't know what does. And then the song comes out in mourning quite often, right? So we see Lucy Gray sing in the arena, deal with her grief and mourn through song. And we see a lot of the things that she writes through song in that too. I will again get into this in my next point, but David writes a lot of the Psalms in mourning, and so I think this is something that we need to really consider jumping into the story, because I haven't seen a lot of people talking about Hamish potentially singing or Hamish being a part of the covey when it all kind of appears to be there, and I'll explain why as we go on in the next video as well. And in the next portion of this video. But I thought to start with that was really interesting that that's what a mourning dove does. And the second thing that I thought from the songbird and the snake is that the Garden of Eden and temptation. And so I think that the arena is actually going to be symbolic of the Garden of Eden, like this beautiful field, this beautiful meadow, this like wondrous, glorious place. But it's actually, in this case, filled with poison, and it's going to speak to temptation, which is actually what happened at the root of the Garden of Eden, right? So God said, don't eat from this one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. ... And then Eve was tempted by the snake to eat from this tree. We've seen it symbolized in an apple. I'll get into this in my headcanon theory, but I think someone's going to die by eating an apple in the arena, and Hamish is going to go, this is about temptation. This whole arena is about temptation. And I wonder if we're going to see like a call forward to like the mutts that we see in the tunnels in Mockingjay, where Peter's like, oh no, Katniss, they're calling your name. Ah! And it's like this hiss, Katniss, Katniss. And in the arena, it's going to be like these kids are kind of like called out into these different temptations of these things that are going to kill them, or these things that they need, by these like mutt snakes that are going to like be calling to them. And because that's a symbol of the Garden of Eden and what happened with Satan tempting Eve in the garden. And so I think it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating. I'm really interested to see, because we didn't see that talked about, and I know that they've kind of said everything you think you know about the games, you don't know any of it. So I feel like this is a pretty okay working theory at this point. So let's read the scripture. It's found in Matthew 10:16-22, and then we're going to talk about it, because it actually gets a bit spicy and a bit deep. And it says, listen carefully, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves, so be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. Have no self-serving agenda. Beware of men whose nature is to act in opposition to God, for they will hand you over to the courts and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be brought before governors and kings for my sake as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. But when they hand you over, do not worry about how or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you within that very hour. Sound like Katniss? For it is not you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and father his child, and children will rise up and rebel against their parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by everyone because of your association with my name. But it is the one who has patiently persevered and endured to the end who will be saved. Guys, let's break it down, shall we? So at the beginning, we see, listen carefully, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Raise your hand if you're like, they're sending them like a lamb to the slaughter. Yeah, we all got that symbolism from the original Hunger Games, right? And so I think it's really, really interesting that this is part of the same verse as be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And I think this speaks to the two sides of what we see here, which is like, you can have wisdom, be wise in your words, and you can also be innocent because no one's told you not to be a certain way. And so I think we're going to see Hamish play into this dichotomy as well. And then it says, for they will hand you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues. I think these like synagogues are going to be like the underground, because I do feel like in most districts the rebellion was kind of like the underground church that you hear about in like communist nations. So we hear about District 11 having these like little spots that they go and they know there's no cameras there, they know they're not being watched, and we know that District 11 in these places has these like symbols of like Christianity. And so I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see if this kind of comes out in the context of the story as well. I do wonder if like the bakery has like an underground, because the rebels Bonnie and Twill were talking to Katniss about how they got like handed these like this bread that was stamped with like the Mockingjay. And so I think there's like a lot of different things that we can pull out of that, but I wonder if the bakery in 12 is going to have anything to do with the rebellion as well, which is interesting because we know that Peter was definitely a rebel, even though he did not seem that way to the Capitol. If Suzanne can pull off that there were these like underground things happening in the Hob or something like that, that was kind of, I would say, like a bit of an underground movement, which is where the Covey would play and where the black market trades and stuff happen. I do wonder if we're going to see in that space is where Hamish gets whipped, not like in the main square, like Gale gets whipped in the main square, and it's going to be like his friends that kind of come and get like save him. And then it says you'll be brought before governors and kings for my sake, which I think speaks to like when he has to go on his victory tour. And they will hand you over, but do not worry how or what you are to say, for it will be given to you within that very hour. We know from experience that Hamish and Katniss are very, very alike. Now, I have many, many theories about why this is. I will explain in another video. They both don't do well being with scripted things. This is why Hamish is like, no. She's not going to be doing your scripted thing. She can't do it. She needs to just be given free will to speak. And I think this speaks into that for her as well. The next verse, it says, brother will betray brother to death, which we know that Hamish's brother dies, and father his child. And I wonder if this is going to speak to someone else betraying a child and there being more conflict, like maybe a best friend or something, but someone's going to give up a child and a child's going to die. And children will rise up and rebel against their parents and cause them to be put to death. And then we're going to see like all of these different like dynamics between the different people within the story. Like a lot of people are going to die. I do think that we're going to see a whole bunch of main character death in this, and it's going to be terrifying and really sad, but it's right here, you guys. And you'll be hated by everyone because of your association with my name. Hamish is going to figure out pretty quickly, anyone who wants to side with me is going to die by the hands of someone, whether it's the people in my district or the Capitol. And so I cannot spend any time with anyone, I cannot have friends, I cannot do anything. And that is probably why he goes and secludes himself and is by himself. And that is so sad to me, but at the same time, I think it's really worthwhile talking about, because poor Hamish was 16. He has been alone for 24 years by the time Katniss and Peter come around. The only friends he has, he sees once a year in the Capitol. That's it. No wonder he turned to the bottle to numb himself, because he doesn't understand what's real and not real anymore. And this is like perpetrated by the constant propaganda that he's getting fed, and by the constant confusion and lies he's being fed, and from his quenched sense of self that he has. And I'll speak about that a bit later too. I think that's kind of main symbolism in the songbird and the snake, be as wise as serpents, innocent as doves. I think this is going to be a really fascinating point to look for and to keep watch for, because nobody is out here talking about this, but I think it's real. I think it's really, really real. We're going to move on to point number 3. Okay, so the third thing that I saw was the lyre. So this as a word has a double meaning, I think. The first thing that really stood out was the instrument of a lyre. So in scripture, we see David using a lyre to soothe Saul. But what happened prior to David soothing Saul with the lyre? Let's talk about it. The first thing that happens is that Saul is disobedient to the Lord. And so the Lord tells Samuel to go anoint a new king, to go to the lowliest tribe, Judah, and then to go to the least wealthy town, Bethlehem, and to like a low hierarchy family, Jesse's family, and then to anoint a child of Jesse's to be the next king. If we look at the 12 tribes of Israel as the 12 districts in Panem, this will help us to get our reference. And in this, we see that in District 12, we see that District 12 is the lowest district. The seam is the lowest class of the lowest district, and like Katniss's family and the Covey kind of live at the very edge of the seam. And so they're in the literal poorest, kind of like David. And so we see Hamish gets picked and he's like, alright, cool, well, I guess I'm going out. Just like we see David get anointed. And so David's not even there at the beginning of it. He's like out in the field tending to his sheep, which we'll get into in my headcanons and theories video. But David's out in the field tending to his sheep when Samuel comes, and his father doesn't even bother to invite him to the party. He eventually comes back in and is told, we're going to anoint you as the next king. And immediately when Samuel anoints David, the Spirit of the Lord leaves Saul and falls on David. And so David is upskilled in everything that he was already doing, given a boldness and confidence by the Lord that Saul no longer had. And so Saul immediately is like, oh my gosh, there's an evil spirit tormenting me. I need someone to play an instrument to soothe my mind. And who else should he call upon but David, who has been called a man of valor, a man of war, a man prudent in speech. He's described by Samuel as being ruddy and handsome. And this is how we hear Hamish described by Katniss, which is so crazy and so fun. But she's like, oh, it's a bit embarrassing, but Hamish was a bit of a looker. And he was strong and his eyes were bright, which describes in the scripture that David's eyes were bright and clear. We see that like David sees clearly what is happening in front of him at all times because he has the Spirit of the Lord upon him. And so I think this is going to be really, really interesting as like a story arc for Hamish, because I think at all times he's going to see the truth clearly. He's going to be able to grapple with the idea of what's real and what's not real quite easily, especially in the context of the arena, which is going to throw the capital off because they're not going to know what's real or not real. Moving forward through this story of David, after he started playing for Saul, he very quickly gained favor with Saul. Saul loved him. Saul went out to battle with the Philistines, and so David was sent back to his family tending to his sheep. And he gets called by his father, and his father's like, hey David, I need you to go take this bread to your brothers. Wink to Peter. And then he goes and takes this bread to his brothers, and he sees this giant taunting the Israelites. And he's like, how dare he taunt the armies of the living God? Like, I need to go do something about this. So he asks around and he's like, guys, what's going to happen to the person that defeats this guy? And they're all like, he's going to get given the king's daughter as a wife. And so he's like, interesting. So he goes in and talks to Saul, and he's like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that would taunt the armies of the living God? And Saul's like, I don't know, but we're afraid and we're not going to do anything about it. And David's like, I want to. Like, sign me up, let me go kill the guy. And then Saul's like, oh, what do you mean, David? You don't have any military training. And David's like, but I killed a bear and a lion that were trying to attack my sheep. So, like, I'm good, I got this. And Saul's like, alright dude, like I don't understand, but like here's my armor, I guess it'll be helpful. And David puts it on and he's like stumbling around in it and he's like, this isn't for me, like I'm going armorless. And Saul's like, in what world is that gonna be safe? Side note, the armor with Kato. But then we see David go and he picks up his slingshot, which is his weapon of choice, and he goes and gets 5 smooth stones. Guys, what happens when they find the edge of the arena? Guys, guess. That's right, we know that Haymitch like accidentally knocks a rock off the edge of the arena and then he sees it come back and he's like, wait a second, a rock? Guys, did you know one of the Hebrew words for praise means to throw a stone? I literally learned this the other week. Like, how crazy is that? How cool is that? And then another word for praise means to dance like in an undignified way that people are probably going to mock you for. And like we see that like Haymitch starts like laughing hysterically and like rejoicing basically when he throws the stone over and recognizes that it's like a force field and he has a way to win. Like that's gonna be so crazy and so fun. That's just a little freebie side note for you all. These stones that David collects, he then shoots one at Goliath, which is how Haymitch is going to use the force field, and it like hits him between the eyes and he falls, and then David runs and decapitates him with his own sword, with the giant's own sword, Goliath's own sword. And I think this is a symbol of how it's going to feel to the capital, is the capital is going to be like, we were quite literally defeated in our own game, what the heck? And like, who is this child to show us up? Like, what on earth? And so I think it's going to be a real like kind of David and Goliath moment. He's like, I just chopped the head off the thing. It's said that the instrument that David played, the lyre that David played, it's called a kinnor, and it has between 3 and 12 strings. The one that's used in a lot of the Psalms, I believe, is a 7-string lyre. And if I am not wrong, we can relook at the cover of Sunrise on the Reaping, but I think there are 7 broken bits of the circle, which people are also asking about. There is your answer, just like the purple is for royalty. I'll show a picture of what the kinnor looks like here, but it usually has 3 to 12 gut strings, usually played with 10, which symbolizes how many districts were willing to rebel. Just 1 and 2 went. So I just thought that was really interesting too. I will say Tam Amber played a mandolin in the prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and so I think this is going to be really, really interesting to see if in fact we're going to get another plucked string instrument. I'm going to guess if Haymitch is actually Covey, he's probably related to Tam, because it is also thought that Tam was the one who owned the goat. And guys, if Haymitch is a shepherd boy like David, he's just gonna have goats. I also wanted to draw the parallels between David, who wrote a lot of the Psalms, who we've been talking about in reference to the lyre. We know that David actually writes from his personal experience in the Psalms. So like Psalm 51 is an excellent example of him in his processing out his trauma in a song form. We see Lucy Gray do the exact same thing with her songs, and so I thought this was a really interesting parallel to draw them together. And so I wonder if we're gonna see Haymitch like write his own songs, if he's gonna like have some kind of song that he's singing throughout the arena. I do think we're gonna see him sing When He Mourns Mazily. I do think we're probably gonna see him sing while he's crawling to the edge of the arena to try and keep himself alive and awake and like cognizant. And so I think we're gonna get a little bit of like humming, a little bit of song, and we're just gonna have to like see how that rolls through. I'll add to this in my headcanons theory, so make sure you tune into my next video. The other thing that I was thinking about with the lyre itself is there is an Australian bird called the lyrebird, and so many of you guys overseas won't know what a lyrebird is, so I'm gonna put a picture on the screen and look at how its tail looks like a lyre. And I thought this was really, really funny because in the movie version of Catching Fire, when Haymitch is describing Finnick to Katniss and Peter, they're talking about like how he's like a bit of a show off and stuff, and Haymitch is like, yeah, he's a real peacock, and like flips his hair, and I just thought like that's a really funny analogy to have between like the peacock and the lyrebird. Just interesting. I thought that was a bit of a cute little nod to the lyrebird before we even knew that this book was going to come out, like well before we knew this book was ever going to come out or a movie was going to be made from it. The lyrebirds are known to be mimicking birds. Guys, does this sound familiar? It should, because that's what mockingjays do. This is a little bit about the lyrebirds. So lyrebirds are known for their ability to mimic the sounds of other birds, chainsaws, car engines, and dog barks. They perform elaborate courtship displays to attract females, including building dirt mounds and singing intricate songs. Lyrebirds defend their territories. Lyrebirds are known for being able to mimic whole song melodies, like mockingjays, and I never really made the connection until I was like, wait, we have a thing in Australia called lyrebirds. Are they even indigenous to Australia? They kind of are. That's really funny. How interesting. Wait, the literal like definition of a lyrebird is like the same as a mockingjay, and I was like, ah! Mind explosion. That has nothing to do with scripture, but I just thought it was very interesting. But the very last thing I wanted to say on this point was that in the very end of Catching Fire, the last scene pretty much, we see Katniss wake up after being pulled out of the arena, and she's like, where is Peter? And she goes bursting into the control room where she sees Plutarch, Finnick, and Haymitch. And she immediately launches herself at Haymitch and is like, you're a liar, you're a liar. And I remembered this the other day and I was like, oh, wait a second. She's like literally speaking to who he is. And I was like, that's so crazy, because liar has a double meaning, right? L-I-A-R, liar. And so I think a lot of people are gonna be like, hey Mitch, you're such a liar, for so long, because we see him not flinch when Katniss is screaming at him that he's a liar. He's like, it's like he's heard it before. But I wonder if we're gonna see this like dichotomy between him and Snow, similar to how Katniss and Snow had this like understanding of, we agreed not to lie to each other. I wonder if this is gonna be a theme in this book as well, and it's that same element of like real or not real. Is Snow playing me, or is he telling the truth, that Katniss has to grapple with, because she's like, I don't trust this guy with a bar of soap, but he's given me no reason to say that anything that's come out of his mouth is a lie. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting dichotomy between like Snow and Haymitch, and I think it's going to speak to what a lot of people think of him in District 12 also. So it's going to be intriguing, to say the least, to see if this is brought up in the context of the games, the pre-interviews, what it's like back in 12, when he gets back to 12, all of that. I wonder if we're gonna see like, you lied to me, like you told me you loved me, and then like this happened, and then he's gonna be fighting with his girlfriend, and then she's gonna get dead. Like, I think it's gonna be really sad, really intense, really interesting, but I think it ties through to all the scriptures that we've already talked about today. That's what I have to say about the liar. I have a couple more things that we're going to talk about. The first one is the pre-cover. So in the pre-cover, I'm going to show a picture here, but there's a shadow of a wing, and there's a purple sunrise on the reaping, and then there's also like that kind of just like muted background. And as soon as I saw this, it reminded me of Psalms 91 verses 1 to 4. It says, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will remain secure and rest in the shadow of the Almighty, whose power no enemy can withstand. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust with great confidence and on whom I rely. For he will save you from the trap of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you and completely protect you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a wall. So basically with this, I believe that Haymitch is going to be a shadow of his former self. I truly believe that Haymitch is the same personality type as Katniss and also the same personality type as Snow, which I'm going to explain in another video a little later. I believe that all of them are INFJs and all of them show their traits in different ways, and so when you're acting not like yourself, you're acting like your shadow functions, and the shadow of this wing I think is going to speak to Haymitch being a shadow of his former self, a shadow of who he knows himself to be, and like having to hide himself to keep safe. And so I think that overall this is going to be quite an interesting thing that we're going to see play out post his games, post the executions that take place, and as the district is rebuilding post all of this craziness and the quelling of the rebellion that was to happen off of his back. And I think he's going to blame himself for all the deaths like Katniss, and I think we're going to see a lot more of those similarities between their characters come out. We're going to see Haymitch as someone who wishes and wants to be a liberator, but he doesn't know how to be that safely because he feels alone in what he's called to do, and he doesn't know who to trust and who's truly with him. He doesn't understand how to discern truth from lies and what other people are talking to him about, which is not like him. Usually he's been very good at being able to do that, and that's what got him to the point of being able to defy the Capitol so brilliantly. Within all of that, we find this quote that says, "They will not use my tears for their entertainment." And I wanted to read to you guys some Bible verses about tears because they're pretty intense. There's 5 scriptures that talk about tears. 3 of them are found in the Psalms, which I'll go over first, and then one's in Jeremiah and one's in Revelation, and I think each of them as individual quotes speaks to how Haymitch is feeling. So the first one is Psalm 56:8, and it says, "You have kept count of my tossings, put my tears in your bottle, are they not in your book?" So he's literally crying out to the Lord in this time, being like, I thought you saw me, I thought I did everything that I should have done, like how has this all gone so horribly wrong? And the second one is Psalm 119:136, which says, "My eyes shed streams of tears because people do not follow your instruction." And I think this is largely what Haymitch is getting at when he's like, if you want me to help you, you have to do exactly as I say. And we see later on that Katniss's biggest red flag in Mockingjay for District 13 is that she doesn't know how to follow instructions. But she has always followed Haymitch's instructions, which has pointed her to the right thing. And so I thought this was really complex as a quote within what we see happening in this universe of the Hunger Games and Panem. The third quote from Psalms is from Psalm 42:3, and it says, "My tears have been my food both day and night." Now, I think there are, again, larger eating disorder things in the Hunger Games, which if people are interested, I'd be happy to talk about. But I think there's a quote where Katniss says that she hasn't seen Haymitch eat until he stops drinking and starts helping them. And I think this points to the fact that Haymitch has like neglected his body because he's been so overwhelmed within himself. When he's secluded himself, I think he probably has a hard time stopping crying. It's been his way of fasting and trying to understand, like, how do I get through this? But I do think that this is a very interesting quote in the context of this series called The Hunger Games, right? Intrigue. The next Bible verse about tears is from Jeremiah 31:16, and it says, "Keep your voice from weeping." It's like he's gonna be silent for a period, like what one of the other scriptures said. What do you mean? And then the last quote we get, which I think is the most profound, is found in Revelation 21:4, and it says, "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away." That is the destruction of the Capitol, family. there'll be no more mourning or pain after that has all been done away with. And yes, there shall be no more death of these tributes, and I'll get into a whole thing about the tribute tax another time, but like, that's what they called the original tax that the Jews had to pay the Romans, was a tribute tax. That's kind of what I thought about when I thought about they will not use my tears for their entertainment, was those particular scriptures. I was like, this is so interesting, and I think it is a huge insight into like how we're gonna see Haymitch portray himself one way to the cameras and be one way when he's alone. The last thing I wanted to talk about was there is a series of quotes that just came out with the release of like the trailer for the book, I guess you could call it. The quotes say, "When you're set up to lose everything you love, what is there left to fight for? Haymitch Abernathy is about to find out, and the whole world is watching." And I think this is gonna speak to the way that Haymitch has to figure out A, who he is, and B, how to portray that to, one, get sponsors, and two, so that he can give the rebels hope. And the push and pull between what he wants the capital to believe about him so that they can support him, and what he needs the rebels to know, and how he's going to be able to use his words as like a double-edged sword that goes both ways. This is what Peter actually does really, really well. So when he sees Peter do it, he's like, finally someone who's better than their words than I was. Because I was doing this on the fly, but Peter can plan this out and execute it with authority. Like, thank God. This also speaks to the real or not real. So while people are watching, are they actually seeing? And what are they seeing? What are they being shown? What is the capital propaganda being put out? Which leads into the deep dive into propaganda. That's all the things that I took just from this cover. So let me know if you agree or disagree in the comment section down below. Let me know if this video has interested you and you want more Christian symbolism in the Hunger Games content, because I would be so happy to make it for you. I also want to do educational videos in this space around different themes and things I saw in the Hunger Games. So like narcissism with Snow and Gale, and with like eating disorders, if you guys would like that, because it's pretty obvious to me that Katniss lives in a weird little eating disordered land that no one's speaking about. I haven't heard a single soul talk about it because it's not really delved into in the movies too much. I also think that this applies to Snow and Haymitch in different ways as well. I want to do a video about how Snow, Katniss and Haymitch are all INFJs, and I want to break down each book and pull apart all the Christian symbols in it chapter by chapter. So let me know if there is anything else you would want to see, or let me know what you want to see first, because I would be happy to provide it to you, because I love you guys. Anyway, that's all for today, and I will talk to you again very soon, but bless you and have a nice night.